Question number 8, Peter Paraone.
Tēnā koe, Mr.
Tēnā koe.
Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Education. What reports has she received, if any, about why the Maori Education Trust is selling its 320-hectare Kahutara dairy farm, formerly known as the late Edward Holmes Farm, that was gifted to the Trust to educate Wairarapa Māori?
Honourable point of order, the Honourable Jerry Brownlee.
Mr. Speaker, I would ask you to have a very good look at this primary question today. The first point that I would make is the question itself has a whole lot of information in it that tends to be there simply to justify the question, where in fact, sir, a simple question, what reports has she received into the sale of the Trust assets, should cover the question. Mr. Speaker, I think it's inappropriate that parties use primary questions and have them accepted in the office of the clerk when in fact they are loaded political questions.
Order. No, I'll deal with this matter. The question is in order, but marginally so. It is certainly not the only question today that's loaded with political statements. It has been accepted. The Minister certainly has a responsibility for answering in regards to has she seen any reports on this matter. We will then look to further supplementaries, but the member is going to have to be very tight with the supplementaries and ensure that they do relate to a ministerial responsibility for an organisation that now operates as a charitable trust. Honourable Hikia Parata.
Tēnā koe, Mr. Speaker. I have received a report from the Ministry of Education on the Māori Education Trust and the Mapuna Aotea Farm. The report makes it clear that the Ministry's interest in the Trust is limited to the administration of those scholarships subsidised by Crown funding provided through the Ministry. The Ministry understands that the farm sale is needed to retire debt, improve the liquidity of the Trust and provide a more suitable income stream for future scholarships. As an independent charitable trust, this is a decision it is entitled to make.
Supplementary question, Peter Paraone.
Supplementary to the Minister. When did a government minister last make an appointment to the Maori Education Trust, and which minister made that appointment?
Honourable Hikia Parata, if the Minister's ever made such an appointment, Honourable Hikia Parata, if she's aware of whether any appointments have been made to the Trust.
Mr. Speaker, I can't answer that question because it's not actually generated by the primary question, and I couldn't say whether a Minister of Education's made appointments. What I can say is that the deed document itself sets out which organisations may appoint members to it, and those organisations are so doing.
Supplementary question.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker.
Peter Paraone.
Did the Maori Education Trust guarantee a debt facility of $11.1 million, and how much was actually drawn down?
Order. No, the Minister has absolutely no responsibility for the Trust. Question number...
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker. To the Minister, has the Minister had any discussions with any of her ministerial colleagues over the perilous financial state of the Trust and its business operations, which has seen debt-laden assets sold? If so, when and what were the outcomes of those discussions?
Honourable Hikia Parata.
Mr. Speaker, no.
Supplementary,
Mr. Speaker.
Peter Paraone.
Can the Minister name the advisors and consultants instructed by the Maori Education Trust to form its commercial arm? And when was that arm formed?
No, that question's just not... The Minister's got no responsibility for this Trust. Point of order, Ron Mark.
And relating to the other answer, the second answer about discussions with other ministers, could I ask you to ask the Minister to reflect on that answer?
Order. That's not a point of order. Order. Member can't do that at all. The question was asked. The question was answered. Question number 9.
Supplementary, Mr.
Supplementary
Speaker.
question, Peter Paraone.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary to the Minister. Given that there has clearly been poor management of this Trust, poor governance, and even worse, oversight by the
Order. I am waiting with patience to see whether there's any responsibility. Can the member just please ask the question in relation to a responsibility of the Minister?
Mr. Speaker, before I proceed, I ask for a point of order.
Point of order, Peter Paraone.
Mr. Speaker, this trust receives funding from government for which the Minister is responsible for.
That's not a point of order. I'm very aware of that. I've done my homework. Now, does the member have a further supplementary he wishes to ask, which is related to a ministerial responsibility? Otherwise, I intend to move on.
I just have a point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Order. A point of order will be heard in silence. Point of order, Peter Paraone.
And I'd like to table a report named the Commonwealth Education Partnerships, where the Minister for Education makes reference to the Education Trust.
Order, leave us sought to table that particular report, Commonwealth Education Partnerships. Is there any objection to that table? There is objection. Question number 9, Jonathan Young.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question to the Minister of Energy and Resources and asks, what reports has he received on renewable electricity generation in New Zealand?
Honourable Simon Bridges.
Mr. Speaker, the Energy Quarterly released today